You wanted love. Maybe a warm hand on your back. Maybe someone who smelled slightly less like sheep. But this is the Middle Ages, and the only thing more common than loneliness is something festering where it shouldn't be. This is not a love story. This is what happens after the love story. The rash, the shame, the silence, and the man with the leeches. Tonight, you will fall in love, and you will deeply regret it. Welcome to your medieval dating life.
The brothel on Baker Street wasn't for bakers. You step through the crooked door. It smells like beeswax, beer, and something you don't want to name. The woman at the desk has no eyebrows. She winks anyway. She whispers, "Upstairs, room 3, she's clean." You smile because you are young, because you are foolish, because you think clean means something here. It doesn't. The hallway creaks like it's remembering, and each step feels like a decision you'll explain to God. You knock. The door opens. She's older than expected. Her breath smells like apples and ash. Her smile like someone who knows this is not your first mistake. But you stay. There's a bed. Of course there's a bed. And straw. And a scratchy wool blanket that hasn't known soap since the last king died. She touches your chest. You try not to cough. You both pretend this is romantic. But the candle flickers and the shadows whisper truth. It lasts 5 minutes. Maybe less. She hums a hymn while you dress. Your hands tremble, maybe from nerves, maybe from something else. She hands you a cloth. "Use this in the morning," she says. You nod. You don't ask why it's stained red. You leave coins on the table, more than she deserves, less than what it'll cost you. As you walk out, a man brushes past you. His lip is cracked. His eyes avoid yours. He enters room 3, and you begin to itch.
Hot baths, hot flesh, hot fungus. The steam hits your face before the door opens. Thick, sweet, like boiled lavender, and something rotting beneath it. You paid 3 coppers for the privilege. A bath. Finally. You enter the stone chamber. There are bodies everywhere. Naked, smiling. Some laugh, some groan, some itch. You take a seat on the ledge. The stone is warm, too warm. A boy brings you a sponge. It has hair on it, not yours.
You wipe your chest anyway. You close your eyes. Let the heat pull the sin from your skin. But sin is stubborn, and so is fungus. Across from you, a woman sneezes into the water. No one flinches. A man beside her dips a finger in the same spot. You pretend not to notice, because this is normal, because this is sacred, because this is Byzantium. The man beside you starts a story about a merchant and a donkey and a nun. You nod politely, but your foot is starting to burn. You check a red patch, maybe a rash, maybe a blessing. It'll grow by morning. Someone brings wine. Someone else brings oil. Someone laughs so hard they slip. A tooth floats by. You stay in the water anyway, because the steam hides everything, especially shame.
A night with the baker's wife and her 17 other lovers. You shouldn't have stayed. But her hands were covered in flour, and her eyes looked at you like you were the first person in weeks who hadn't just asked for bread. That felt like something. Maybe love. Maybe lust. Maybe a moment of human weakness shared between two souls and a bucket of sourdough. The bakery smells like yeast and smoke and secrets. She lights a single candle. Her apron falls. You try not to look surprised. You try to pretend this is normal. You try to ignore the fact that your hands are shaking. You kiss her. She tastes like salt and burnt crust. She tells you not to speak. She says her husband is asleep. You nod. You don't ask where or with whom. The room is warm, too warm. The flour in the air clings to your throat. The sweat on your back has nowhere to go, and your thoughts feel louder than the creaking of the bed. It ends before it should, or maybe exactly when it needed to. She hands you a cloth. You don't know what to do with it. She laughs. "You're not the first," she says. And for a moment you wonder. First what? First today? First this week? Or just the first one stupid enough to fall for the baker's wife? You leave quietly. The streets are empty. Even the rats seem asleep. And something stings between your legs. 2 days later, you notice a spot. Small, pink, like a kiss. Then there's another, and another. You try to pray, but the priest keeps scratching his neck and talking about original sin. You go to the healer. He grinds something green into a paste. He smears it where the sun doesn't shine. He says you must have been touched by an angel. You don't correct him. You try to sleep, but the itching keeps you awake, and so do the dreams. Of her, of the heat,
of a sound you now know wasn't the bed, but your skin. Weeks pass. You avoid bread. You avoid women. You avoid looking at yourself in the water basin. And then, one day, you see her again. She's walking with the miller. He limps. He coughs. He smiles at her like you once did. And for a moment, just one, you feel less alone and much, much more afraid, because some things are worth dying for, but not all of them wear aprons.
Love potions and why your teeth fell out. You heard whispers. They called her the Red Widow, not because she'd buried husbands, but because she always wore a red scarf and sold little bottles that promised love, or lust, or whatever the difference was, in a world where both could kill you. You didn't mean to go, but loneliness has a scent, and you followed it into her hut. It smells like cinnamon and burnt feathers and sweat. There are jars everywhere, some with herbs, some with things that used to be alive. One has a frog. It's still blinking. She smiles, all gums, no teeth. You try not to stare. She says you're pretty. She says you have an open aura. You say nothing. You hand her a coin. You ask for something warm, something that makes you less invisible. She pours a thick black syrup into a clay vial. She says it's made of wine, rosemary, and something called silver breath of Venus. You drink it that night. It tastes like metal and hope and something sticky that stays on your tongue. You dream of her, not the widow, but the girl from the bread line. She holds your face and calls you beautiful. She doesn't laugh. She doesn't vanish. You wake up sweating. You smile. Your gums feel strange. You take the potion again and again. Each night you dream more, and each morning you lose another tooth. First the molar, then the one beside it, then a canine. The dreams grow warmer. So does your fever. You return to her hut. She isn't surprised. She pours another vial. This one glows faintly blue. You ask what's in it. She laughs. Then, softly, everything that ever made someone say yes. You drink it anyway. The next day, your gums bleed. The day after, you collapse in the market. The priest says it's punishment for lust. The midwife says it's poison. The widow says nothing. They find her hut empty, all jars smashed. The frog is gone. So is the red scarf. You never see her again. But you still dream of fire and love and teeth. Mostly teeth. You were warned, weren't you? Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't rot your face. The nun with a past, a secret, and a cough. She never looked at you during prayer. But sometimes you looked at her. Just for a moment.
just enough to wonder why she always sat in the last pew, why her hands were always gloved, and why her cough never went away. They said her name was Sister Magdalena, but no one remembered when she joined. She had no letters, no family, no history. Just a voice that sounded like frost cracking on stone, and a smile that never showed her teeth. You came to the convent for healing. You had a sore lower than you could explain. The priests sent you here to be cleansed by silence, to be made right in the eyes of the Lord. They didn't mention the part where it burns when you kneel. She was the infirmarian, the healer, the one with the keys to the herb room, and to the rumors no one dared speak aloud. She gave you a tincture, wormwood, vinegar, mint. It made you sweat. It also made you forget things, like time, like shame, like pain. One night you heard crying, not the distant moans of the fevered, but something softer, close, under the chapel stairs. You followed the sound. You weren't supposed to. You always do what you're not supposed to. You saw her, in the candlelight, bent over, whispering to something you couldn't see. When she stood, there was blood on her dress, but no wound, only silence. She looked at you for the first time. Her eyes were hollow, but not empty, filled with a kind of exhausted truth. There was a soldier, she said, a long time ago. He had kind hands. Then she coughed, wet, sharp, and something pink hit the floor. You told no one. You left the stairs. You burned your robe. Weeks passed. Her cough worsened. So did your rash. One morning, she wasn't in the infirmary. Her door was locked. By dusk, it was nailed shut. They said she'd gone to another convent. They said she'd been called to a higher purpose. They said a lot of things. None of them included the tiny grave behind the stables. Sometimes you dream of her voice, telling you about the soldier, and love, and the way some secrets rot you from the inside. Your rash is worse now. You stopped praying, because you know God doesn't answer whispers, especially the ones wrapped in red cloth and buried in convent walls. Your skin peels, but she says it's normal. It started with a little patch, just below your navel. Pink, dry. You thought it was nothing. A heat rash, maybe. Or the wool. Or the bathhouse. Or the guilt. You scratched it once, lightly. It bled. Not much. Just enough to feel real. Just enough to say, this will go away. It didn't. The woman at the market saw it first. She didn't say anything. She just moved her basket to the other arm and didn't look back. The next morning, it spread across your hip, down your thigh. You avoided the mirror. You visited the healer again, not the Red Widow. She was gone. This one was new. Her hut smelled like rosemary. She wore gloves. She looked at the peeling skin, pressed a finger into the center of the patch. It left a dent. It didn't bounce back. She said. That's normal. And then she smiled. She handed you a paste. Gray, grainy. You asked what was in it. She said, river ash, goat milk, a whisper of foxglove. You asked if it would burn. She said, only a little. You applied it that night. It burned more than a little. It felt like your skin was learning to scream. You didn't sleep. The candle melted down to a stub. Your hands shook. And when you touched your thigh again, a piece came off. You went back to the healer. She wasn't there. No door, no hut. Just an empty square of grass and a single glove. The next day, you wrapped your legs in linen, tightly. The smell made people stare. You told them it was a blessing, a holy rot, a trial of the flesh. They nodded politely and stepped back. Your teeth feel loose now. You avoid smiling. You avoid bread. You avoid mirrors. You scratch when no one is watching. You bleed without making a sound. You pray, not to be healed, just to be forgotten. Because if this is normal, then you want no part in what comes next.
Pox and politics in the king's bedroom. They say he was beautiful. The king. Hair like wheat, skin like cream, teeth like ivory. But they never mention the sores. They never mention the stink. You didn't plan to become a royal attendant. You just brought towels. You carried them up the spiral stairs, through the heavy oak doors, into a room that smelled like honey wine and something underneath it. Something metallic. Something wrong. You weren't allowed to look directly at him, but you saw enough. He sat in the bed, half covered in silks. His lips were cracked. His hands were gloved. His wig slightly off-center. He scratched behind his ear. Something fell onto the pillow. It wriggled. The physician leaned in. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "the treatment must continue." The king groaned. He blinked slowly. You weren't sure if he was awake or already dreaming of something worse. The treatment involved mercury, a paste, applied to the gums. He had no teeth left, but the ritual remained. The queen hadn't shared his bed in years. She had her own chamber, her own priests, her own healer. Rumor said she wore gloves in church, not for piety, but because her fingertips peeled like old wax. The king had many mistresses, some named, some not, most buried. Those who lived wore perfume strong enough to mask a battlefield. You saw one once, slipping out the side door, her face veiled, but her walk uneven. She bled through her dress. She left a mark on the marble floor. No one cleaned it. They just placed a rug. In court, the king smiled. He waved with gloves. He blessed the poor. He passed laws about morality. The bishop praised his virtue. The poets wrote of his golden youth. The people threw roses. And still, each night, you watched the sores spread. They reached his chest, his neck, his eyelids. He could no longer close his eyes without them weeping. The court physician began drilling holes in the ceiling to let the demons escape, he said. They never did. One night, the king whispered something to you. His breath was thick, sweet, sickly, like spoiled wine. He said, "Tell them I died noble." You nodded. He didn't die that night, or the next. He lingered, like smoke that doesn't rise, like a candle that won't quite go out. And when he finally did, they dressed him in white, painted his cheeks, buried him with the saints. The people wept, the poets sang, and no one spoke of the flesh beneath the robes, the lesions beneath the lace, the truth that wore a crown and rotted in silence.
The tavern girl who sold warm beer and cold regrets. Her name was Bruna. No one knew if that was her real name or just something men started saying when they forgot their wives' faces. She worked at the end of the square, where the mud was deepest and the beer was warmest, and the nights were loud. You were drunk the first time you saw her, or maybe the second. She wore a red skirt and a laugh that cut through music. You told yourself you wouldn't stay long, but your legs didn't believe you. She touched your cheek, not softly, like she was checking for heat, like you were already sick. She asked your name. You gave her your brother's. She smiled, like she'd heard that one before. The room behind the tavern wasn't a room. It was a closet with breath in it. She pushed you inside. Her hands were cold. Her lips tasted like beer foam and lies. There was no bed, just sacks of wheat and an old coat someone left there. You used it as a blanket. You think someone else used it before you. It was quick. Everything in that town was quick. The harvest, the dancing, the infection. She bit your shoulder. You laughed. She didn't. You fell asleep for a minute, or maybe you passed out. When you opened your eyes, she was gone. So was your coin pouch. So was your dignity. You didn't care. Until 3 days later. Your thighs burned. You tried to pee behind the stable. It felt like fire and smelled like metal. You asked the stable boy what to do. He gave you a cabbage leaf. He said to sleep with it between your legs. You did. You woke up bleeding. You returned to the tavern. Bruna wasn't there. The new girl had freckles. She wouldn't touch you. You heard Bruna went east, or to a convent, or to a grave. Rumors moved faster than she did, but just barely. You found someone else eventually. She didn't laugh like Bruna. She didn't steal either. But something inside you missed the bite. Even as your skin flaked, even as your lips cracked, even as you started coughing up something thick and gray. You tell yourself it wasn't her, that maybe it was the bathhouse, or the cabbage, or God. But sometimes, when you close your eyes, you still hear her laugh. It echoes in places you didn't know could echo, and it feels warm, like beer, like blood, like the last time you ever felt wanted. You thought she gave you pleasure, but what she really gave you was time, just enough to regret everything.
Toothless and terrified. The midwife's second job. She had no name. Or maybe she had too many. Some called her Mother Gerda. Some Red Gerda. The church called her a woman of herbs. The butcher called her a whore. The mayor just called her at night. She helped you once, when your sister started bleeding in her 3rd month. Gerda came without questions, just warm cloth, bitter tea, and eyes like burnt paper. She stayed all night, whispered words you'd never heard in Latin. She wrapped the body in rags. You never spoke of it again, but you remembered her hands, strong, steady, too steady. Later, you learned she did more than deliver babies. She also stopped them, for girls too young, for wives too tired, for nuns who didn't ask. She had a cellar, dark, damp. You went there once, not for yourself, for someone else. Or that's what you told yourself. Inside, it smelled like earth and metal, and rosemary, always rosemary, to cover the smell of blood, they said, or to calm the spirits. She gave you a vial, thick, yellow. She said to drink it warm, to wait, to bleed. You asked what was in it. She said, hope, and a little vinegar. You drank it. It burned. You bit your sleeve to stay quiet. No one must know. It worked. Sort of. You lost the child. And something else. A part of you. Or all of you. Weeks later, your gums bled. Your hair thinned. Your hands trembled. You returned to her, asked if it was normal. She nodded and gave you a different vial. This one was blue. She said it was for strength. You drank it anyway. You saw other women in her house, some young, some not, all silent. No one made eye contact, but they all scratched. You heard rumors that some of her herbs caused visions, that others caused death, that one girl left with bleeding that never stopped, that Gerda buried her in the same field where she grew her mint. But no one stopped her, because sometimes pain is useful. Sometimes silence is easier, and sometimes there are no other options,
Now your teeth are gone, not all at once, but slowly, softly, like they didn't want to stay in you anymore. You still see her sometimes, at dusk, by the stream, collecting herbs. She nods, you nod, and neither of you says a word, because both of you know there are things more permanent than guilt and deeper than teeth. Confessions to the town gossip and her rotting lips. She was always there. At the well, at the market, in doorways too narrow for comfort. Her voice, a whisper you couldn't trace. Her laugh, too loud for someone with no upper lip. They called her Els, or Elsie, or that one with the mouth. Children feared her. Men ignored her. Women both hated and needed her. She never wrote anything down, but she remembered everything. Dates, names, affairs, abortions, infections. She knew who coughed, who scratched, and who wept alone behind the butcher's stall. You went to her one night. You told yourself it was just to ask, just to check, just to confirm what you already feared. Her house was smaller than you'd imagined, stuffed with rags and jars and smells. A corner pot bubbling. You didn't ask what was inside. She sat by the fire, a blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders, her mouth a grimace of raw pink flesh, her breath sweet and sour like rotting fruit, her eyes sharp as fish bones. "You've been with someone," she said. Not a question. You nodded. "She didn't tell you, did she?" You shook your head. She laughed. Something dripped from her lip onto her chin. She didn't wipe it. "Let me see," she said. You hesitated. She clicked her tongue. "Oh, child, modesty is for the uninfected." You pulled down your waistband. She didn't flinch. She leaned in. She sniffed. She hummed. "Third stage," she whispered. "Or maybe second. Hard to tell when it's this angry." You felt cold. She handed you a cloth, not to cover yourself, to bite. She poured something onto her fingers. It hissed. She touched your skin. You screamed. The walls didn't care. The town was used to it. Afterward, she gave you a drink. Dark, thick. You drank it because you wanted to believe her, because she was ugly, and ugly people tell the truth. You asked her why she still did it, why she helped. She looked into the fire, and for once her voice was soft. "Because once someone helped me, and I gave them this." She pointed at her lips. You never forget your first regret. You visited her again and again, each time more pain, more honesty, less hope. She told you things about the priest, the widow, the baker's boy. Everyone had something. Everyone had someone. Except her. One day, the door was locked. The window shuttered. No one saw smoke from her chimney. They said she died alone. They said the infection finally reached her heart. They said it was a blessing. You still see her sometimes, in dreams, at wells, in mirrors. She mouths your name with no lips. You still don't know what hurts more, what she said, or what she never got to.
He was only 15. Strong arms, burnt hands. A laugh too loud for someone who barely spoke. They called him Ember, because he glowed when he worked, because something about him always seemed too hot to last. You remember the first time he smiled at you, in the rain, while you tried to carry too many apples. He took one, bit it, didn't ask. You didn't mind. No one smiled at you like that. No one made you want to stay longer in the rain. The first time was behind the forge. Hot air, sticky palms. His hands smelled like iron and ash. Yours like soap and shame. It was quick, clumsy, perfect. You thought it was love, or something close enough to die for. And that's what it became. 2 weeks later, he stopped eating. His tongue turned pale, then purple, then swollen. He said nothing, because he couldn't. The healer said it was infection. The priest said it was punishment. His father said nothing at all. He coughed blood into his apron. They burned it. He scratched behind his ears until they bled. He stopped looking at mirrors. You brought him tea. He smiled. With cracked lips, no teeth, only sorrow. You tried to speak for him, to explain, but no one listened, because his mouth was closed, and yours wasn't supposed to be open. They buried him behind the forge, with iron nails and a broken hammer. You didn't cry, not then, not when the priest refused to say his name, not when his father spat at your feet, but later, when you tried to hum the song he used to sing, the one about the sea and the wind and the girl with no name. Your throat closed. No sound came out. No sound came out. You haven't sung since, not even to yourself, not even in dreams. They say his ghost still lingers near the forge, that on certain nights you can hear a rasping breath or a whisper that never finishes the word. You never go near it, not because you're afraid, but because you already know what it's trying to say. And you know, you're the reason it can't.
The secret map in the apothecary's drawer. He never smiled. The apothecary. Not once. But his hands were steady, and his jars were always full. So the town trusted him. Sort of. His shop sat between the church and the slaughterhouse. No one knew if that was by accident or design. You first went there for a toothache. He gave you clove oil. It worked. You went back the next week for something else. Then something more. Until one day you didn't even pretend to be well anymore. The shop smelled like pepper and old paper, and something faintly sweet,
like wilted flowers on a grave. He never asked questions. He just opened a drawer, measured, poured, wrapped, and said, "Soft, 3 coppers, or 1 story." You always paid. One night, he forgot to lock the cabinet. Or maybe he didn't forget. Maybe he wanted you to look. You did. Inside was not medicine. Not exactly. There were scrolls, drawings, pages covered in tiny sketches of human parts. Tongues, lips, genitals, each labeled, each mapped, each marked with a symbol, sometimes a star, sometimes a black dot, sometimes a skull. You found a folder labeled red mouths, another peeling groins, another spines with tremor. You turned to leave, but something made you stay. You opened the bottom drawer. There were names, dozens, written in faded ink. Beside each name, a date. Beside each date, a fate. Marla, 18, tongue blackened, expired. Jory, 26, refused remedy, buried behind bathhouse. Elric, 17, partial recovery, sent to monastery. Then, your name. No fate listed, just a question mark. You closed the drawer. He stood behind you, silent. His eyes not angry, not afraid, just tired. He said nothing, just handed you a vial, amber glass, cork sealed in wax. You took it. You drank it that night. It burned. You slept like stone. You dreamed of maps and skin and someone tracing a line down your spine with fingers made of ash. When you woke, he was gone. The shop boarded up. The jars emptied. The drawer locked. Soft. But the map stayed in your mind. Every red spot, every sketch, every fate. Especially the question mark, still waiting beside your name.
Imagine you're narrating an audiobook, slowly, with emotion, proper pauses, emphasis, and breathing. Keep the rhythm calm but not monotonous. If there are quotation marks, read them like you're quoting someone. If you see 3 dots, take a gentle pause. That one friend who always survives, and that's suspicious. Everyone's dying, coughing, scratching, melting. And then there's him. Milo. Just Milo. No surname, no parents, no visible symptoms. He shows up at every funeral, not crying, just watching. Eating bread like it's not the end of the world, because for him, it never is. You shared a bed once. Not like that. It was winter. You were both cold. You woke up sneezing. He woke up whistling. The baker's daughter kissed him twice. She was dead in a week. He had perfect skin, no rash, not even a freckle. He swam in the same pond where they found that cow with the boils.
He drank from the same cup as the blind priest. He once ate a raw fish and said it tasted confident. You started asking questions like how, why, what are you? He laughed. Of course he laughed. His teeth too white, too even. He said softly, some of us are just built different. You didn't believe him. One night you followed him through the woods, past the mill, into a clearing no one talked about. There were stones arranged in a circle, a dead bird in the center, and Milo, smiling, naked. You turned away. He didn't stop you. The next morning, he brought you soup. You didn't ask what was in it. You drank every drop. You got better, sort of. Your sores dried. Your breath returned. Your dreams stopped hurting. He never asked for thanks. He just whistled. Same tune, every day. You tried to hate him. You really did. But when your cousin died, and your neighbor vanished, and your skin began to peel again, Milo knocked on your door, holding something that steamed and smelled like mint and something older. You drank it again and again, and each time you felt a little less sick and a little less you. Now, when you look in the mirror, you don't see sores, but you don't quite see yourself either. You've stopped asking where he goes at night. You don't want to know. Because maybe, just maybe, some of us are built different, and some of us are being rebuilt.
The Pilgrim's Return, and the gift no one asked for. He left in spring, with sandals too thin, a walking stick too proud, and faith that smelled like lilacs. The whole village watched him go. He said he was going to see relics, to walk the path of saints, to beg forgiveness in cities older than memory. He kissed your hand before leaving. You told him, "Don't come back unless you're glowing." He came back in autumn, and he glowed, just not the way you meant. His skin was slick with sweat, his eyes sunken, but he smiled, teeth chipped, tongue trembling. He said, "I touched the veil of Saint Otelia." He said, "I drank from the fountain of Charlemagne's sin." He said, "I walked barefoot into the tomb of purity." You nodded, because that's what you're supposed to do when someone brings you miracles. Then the fever started. First the baker's wife, then the mayor's boy, then the priest. They coughed, they wept, they peeled. He stayed in his cottage. He said he was purging. He burned sage. He boiled mint. He bled himself twice a day. The chickens died anyway. You visited him once. He hugged you. His skin felt like damp parchment. He whispered something. You didn't catch the words, but the tone was soft, like goodbye or guilt. 2 days later, he was dead. They burned the cottage. They burned his clothes. They salted the path he walked on. But it didn't matter. By then, the coughing had reached the monastery. The nuns bled from their noses.
The dogs ran from the bells. The village held a fast. They prayed. They whipped themselves with reeds. They burned herbs. They bled themselves twice a day. The chickens died anyway. You visited him once. He hugged you. His skin felt like damp parchment. He whispered something. You didn't catch the words, but the tone was soft, like goodbye or guilt. 2 days later, he was dead. They burned the cottage. They burned his clothes. They salted the path he walked on. But it didn't matter. By then, the coughing had reached the monastery. The nuns bled from their noses. The dogs ran from the bells. The village held a fast. They prayed. They whipped themselves with reeds. They burned herbs. They whispered his name only once. Then, never again. You still think of him, of the boy who left with sandals and came back with silence. You wonder what he touched, what touched him, what he brought back, and whether it was ever really meant to be healed. Sometimes you dream of his smile, teeth rotting, but still trying. And you wake up wondering if faith is contagious or just the sickness that gets in first. Or just the sickness.
Alone, again, but wiser and itchy. It's quiet now. The street, the square, your bones. No one knocks on your door anymore. No one asks if you're well, because they already know the answer, and because you're the last one left to ask. You've rearranged your furniture 5 times, not for comfort, just to feel something move. The bed is closest to the fire now. The table faces the window, where you count dogs and coughs and crows. Your skin, well, you stopped trying to heal it. You scratch without apology now. You bleed without shame. And when the neighbor's cat hissed at your hand, you hissed back. You boil herbs, not because they help, but because the steam feels like company. You drink vinegar with honey, because someone once told you it cleans the blood, though your blood has stopped listening. The mirror fell last month. You didn't pick it up. You didn't want to see what looked back. The last time someone touched you, they were asking for directions. You gave them the wrong ones, and a warning. Don't trust women in red scarves, or boys who whistle, or men with clean fingernails. They didn't listen. No one ever does. You sleep on your side now, to stop the coughing, to press your ear against the earth and hear what the worms are saying. They whisper slowly, patiently, like old friends. You dream of names, Els, Bruna, Milo. None of them come back, but they knock on the inside of your eyelids. Sometimes you wake up laughing because the absurdity is unbearable. You wanted love. You got rashes. You wanted comfort. You got ointments. You wanted to be seen. You got documented. You lived, somehow. And when the scratching gets too loud, and the fire too low, and the moon too full,
You wrap your sores in linen. You lie down. You breathe in the steam. And you think, maybe love wasn't real, but this itching is. And you made it. It didn't kill you, just rewrote you, one patch at a time.